Today I will be taking you through the findings of our first published guidance report, Putting Evidence to Work, a School's Guide to Implementation. But firstly, what do we mean by guidance report? Evidence for Learning's guidance reports are clear and actionable recommendations for teachers on a range of high priority issues based on the best available evidence. Guidance reports have been developed as a useful starting point into specific topics. They are intended to support practitioners in putting research and evidence to work in their own settings. Our UK partner, the Education Endowment Foundation, reviewed the best available international research and consulted experts, teachers and academics to produce these guidance reports. The Evidence for Learning team have added to this by consulting with Australian experts and adding illustrations of great practice from Australian schools. Now you'll see the cover of the guidance report we'll be discussing in the workshops. This document is available at Evidence for Learning's website, evidenceforlearning.org.au. Just select guidance reports from the top navigation menu. The Implementation Guidance Report presents a framework for implementation with 6 recommendations. The foundations for implementation form the first 2. 1. Treat implementation as a process, not an event. Plan and execute it in stages. 2. Create a leadership environment and school climate that is conducive to good implementation. The other recommendations are embedded within the interconnected stages of explore, prepare, deliver and sustain. It is important to keep in mind that these stages aren't linear or neatly defined. Explore. Define the problem you want to solve and identify appropriate programs or practices to implement. Prepare. Create a clear implementation plan, judge the readiness of the school to deliver that plan, then prepare staff and resources. This is the phase in which schools spend most of their time when effectively implementing a new approach or program. Deliver. Support staff, monitor progress, solve problems, and adapt strategies as the approach is used for the first time. Sustain. Plan for sustaining and scaling the intervention from the outset and continuously acknowledge and nurture its use. We'll look at each of these stages in turn, but let's start by unpacking implementation to understand why we focus on this when partnering with schools. We have learnt that good implementation is a crucial component of improvement and change in a school. It ensures that we are giving the approach that we are testing the best chance of success. We commissioned the Centre of Evidence and Implementation to look at scoping for implementation in education. You'll see the definition that was highlighted through this scoping review. It is defined as a specified set of planned and intentional activities designed to integrate evidence-informed practices into real-world settings. From this study and subsequent work with schools in testing the implementation guidance report, we've learned a few things. Implementation is the combination of small things done well. It's common sense, but it's not always common. It's rare that it's done really effectively because of the work that needs to go into creating a vision and translating the vision to shared practice. Implementation is applicable to anything. It's not just there to support the introduction of new activities. And the final thing, that when it has been done well, it's been a process of adaptation rather than a new bolt-on activity. This is the cycle that underpins the guidance, but before we go any further, there's a few key points to keep in mind. There are points where you might make a decision to stop, revisit plans and adapt. Just because you've had an idea doesn't mean you should do it. An assessment of the readiness of the school to implement something might be the reason to pause, adapt or even think again. Some of these steps can happen in parallel. Delivery doesn't begin until at least halfway through the cycle, and the guide has more on the prepare phase than the other 3. And change takes time. This process might be a 3-year endeavour. Gardening provides a suitable metaphor for implementation. You'll see it expressed in the icons. The implication is that planning and preparation, choosing the right seeds for your soil and weather conditions, the weeding and the preparing of the soil, the windbreaks and the companion planting, that is what's required to make implementation work. Not just the green shoots or even the showy flowers bit that feels exciting because something's happening. This gives rise to the first recommendation in the guidance, to treat implementation as a process and not an event. The second is to create a leadership environment and school climate which is conducive to good implementation. Firstly, implementation is a process. Continuing the gardening analogy, imagine someone drove down to the gardening centre, bought all of the plants which look good, the bright and colourful ones. They brought them back and plonked them in their garden. Did this lead to a beautiful garden? Perhaps for a short time, but very difficult to sustain and possibly a big mess then to manage. This was gardening as an event. You'll see that each of the recommendations is supported by a checklist which can guide your reflections. These are found in the implementation guidance report. The second recommendation is about environment and culture within a school, the climate supporting your garden, if you will. It's tempting to borrow heavily from management speak in describing school improvement, but really this is about the nature of human learning and is one of the things that recommendation is emphasising in relation to implementation. The worry about this, and this recommendation in general, is that leadership and culture are things we are told all the time are important in schools, but lots of the conversation and effort around them isn't specific, nor is it always clear how they link to student outcomes. The guidance report tries to draw out some specific things. In summary, are staff open to change, not harangued and increasingly trying to do everything and being told that everything is falling apart? It's important that we are conscious of implementation fatigue. Or is it the reverse? Are staff perhaps too complacent with the work occurring in your school? Is there a climate conducive to change? Is professional development a priority? Is there trust and open professional dialogue? Is there wise and critical use of data to monitor and a willingness to try new things and for them to fail? Is there a keenness to want to get better, a focus on getting good at getting better even? Finally, having people that understand and lead implementation or change in your school is crucial. Identify and support specific leadership capacity for the change you're implementing. In a very practical sense, no matter what strategy or strategic plan you try and implement with your team, its success and efficacy are going to be held back by the people implementing the plan if the culture does not support them. Here are our checklist questions again, a point of reflection before moving to the staged approach for implementation. Now that we're comfortable that our foundations are strong, we are ready for the process and our culture is primed for change. From here, we can look at the remaining recommendations as stages within an approach to implementation. The objective of the define phase is to identify a clear priority that is amenable to change. Be careful here of solutionitis. You need to start with a problem, not a solution. Collect data and draw on a range of sources to pinpoint the area of need. Think broadly about what constitutes data. Are you calling on evidence from your own context as well as national and global learnings? As you begin to refine your priority, think next about what it means for your school context and sustainability, because change isn't short-term. Once you have settled on the decision to adapt or adopt a new practice or approach, you're ready to move on from this phase. And to check this, use the checklist questions to reflect on your progress or conduct an audit. The prepare phase is where you will spend most of your time, and it's important not to move on too quickly. In this phase, you should create a clear implementation plan, judge the readiness of the school to deliver that plan, and then prepare your staff and resources. This is an example of one plan created and implemented by Richardson Primary School in the ACT. This plan features in our guidance report as an example of many of the elements that I'll mention. It has a level of detail that gave the staff at Richardson Primary School a shared vision and plan to work towards, specific outcomes to measure, and activities to guide their action. The prepare questions look not only at the creation of a plan, but the quality of that plan by prompting reflection around a few key elements. Once you're comfortable that you've given the prepare phase the appropriate attention, it's time to deliver. The delivery phase includes the ongoing support of staff, the monitoring of progress, problem solving and adapting strategies as your approach is tested for the first time. It's particularly important that leadership continue their involvement through this phase rather than leaving teachers to get on with the work. Once again, checklist questions will help support you in assessing the success of this phase and focus your attention to those key questions. Plan for sustaining and scaling an intervention from the outset and continuously acknowledge and nurture its use. This is where it's unhelpful to think about the process as a linear one. From the beginning, you should ask yourself, if we find this is effective, can we expose more teachers and students to it? The final checklist will support you to think about the fidelity, outcomes, and the potential of continuation. Once you've made it this far, it's time to reevaluate and begin adapting. From all of this work, there's a few key points to remember. View implementation as a process rather than an event. Implementation needs time, especially in the preparation phase. Have a clear, logical, and well-specified plan. Know where to be tight and where to be loose. Adopt a range of strategies for implementation. Use high-quality training and follow-on support with your staff. Expect things to be difficult initially, and think about sustainability from the outset. There are a number of ways that you can continue to engage with the work of evidence for learning.